Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to this webinar on how to find and work with a sync agency. My name is Katrina Balsius, and my teammate from DISCO, Tim Byrne, is here too, and Holden. And we are a part of your DISCO business development team, and we're going to be guiding you through today's discussion and training. And then Holden, who's on too, is going to be helping us answer just some questions that they come in. And you've probably talked to him on support if you've ever wrote in any questions. He's amazing. We are going to start with a chat from Kayla and Josh in just a minute. And then we're going to move into a training based on some things that we talk about with them. And just really helping you guys kind of get all your musical ducks in a row within DISCO so you can share that with different people in your network. So I know some people are already kind of chatting in, which is great. Like, please feel free to say hello and let us know where you're quarantining from. And if you have any specific questions, best to put that in the Q&A section of Zoom at the bottom. And then we will get to a Q&A after with Kayla and Josh, and then throughout the training, we can do that at the end as well. So without further ado, let's meet our panelists. We have Kayla Moneta from Greater Goods and Josh Briggs from Terrorbird. So excited to have you guys. Thanks for being here. Let's just kick it off with you guys introducing yourselves. Tell us what you do and kind of how you got to your position now. Kayla, if you want to kick it off.
Cool.
Is it delayed?
Hey guys, I'm Kayla. I work at a company called Greater Goods. Is it or no?
Don't worry, just keep going.
So it's fine.
Okay.
You're all good.
Technology.
All right. Technology. Yeah, basically I head up our creative licensing department at the Greater Goods Co. We're a small team. There's 4 of us. Mike is the owner of our company. He and I head up creative. So basically my job is to pitch across all briefs that come in across every type of media. So for film opportunities, TV opportunities, ads, trailers, promos, all of that kind of goes across my desk. You know, with being a small company, I also do a lot of our A&R alongside Mike. So it's kind of like a 50-50 balance of both of those things. And I've been there for about a little over a year and a half. I don't know what time is anymore. It doesn't exist. Yeah, and I've kind of had a long journey to get to my current role. My career started in New York. I lived there for about 8 years, and my career started in music journalism. I was working at Vice, specifically on Noisy, their music channel, and I was their marketing manager, and I also wrote for the website as well. And through there, I kind of started meeting a lot of industry people and switched over to the label world, where I worked at Downtown Records, doing creative marketing, and then Cult Records for a bit, until I realized that working at indie labels can sometimes be sad. So I decided to move to LA and switch to licensing. I worked at a publisher for a little bit called Third Side, before finding my footing at Greater Goods with my current role, which I love because I enjoy wearing many different hats. And that is my life in a nutshell.
Very nice, thank you. It's always fun to hear people's journey from zero to hero, you know. How about you, Josh?
Yeah.
I'm older than Kayla, so I'll try to keep this brief as possible. Fortunately, not many stops on my journey. I interned. That's really where my career started. I interned at Capitol Records in LA for my last semester of school. Was able to get into like a bunch of temp situations because of that, and that's how I was always more interested in independent music anyway, but I it was great to see kind of how a major operates. And I worked in the A&R department there for about a year. And then from there, made a jump over to ASCAP just because of a coworker who knew they were hiring. And I worked at ASCAP in the membership department for 6 years. And met a lot of people because it's basically Switzerland. You're the one paying people, so it's always nice to be able to. You could talk with lawyers and publishers and managers and labels and everybody else, and obviously, did a bunch of showcases for artists and development and that kind of thing. And that's when I met the folks at Terrorbird, Jess and Lauren, at the time, and they had just started a publishing company to support their sync licensing business, and at the time, it was all adminned by other publishers. And so I was brought in to figure out how to take a lot of that stuff in-house. And so I started doing that in the beginning of 2012. So I've been there for coming up on 8.5 years, which is it's literally the longest I've done anything in my life. But a couple of years ago, I moved over. I look after our publishing roster as well as our licensing roster, because I'm, as a company, we've always been very licensing focused. The very first thing I ever did with anyone at Terrorbird was a licensing showcase when I was still at ASCAP and they were just starting the licensing company. So it's always been kind of part of my world, but in the last, obviously in my time at Terrorbird, it's completely taken over that. So I look after and manage our team of 7 folks who work across the licensing and publishing teams. And so, but similarly split along with Kayla, it happens with any skeleton crew, right? You're splitting your time between the creative, the A&R, and the admin, right? Just the day-to-day function and health of the business. So obviously the creative stuff is the most fun. I don't do barely any day-to-day pitching anymore. Fortunate that the team has really taken that over, but I can still talk about it. So happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. That's great. Thanks. Thanks for that. So the first sort of thing we're interested in is some of the ways that you guys find new artists and what you are looking for when you're signing new artists, how much time you spend actually looking or signing new artists versus you're really, really busy as you are. So if you could go into a bit of that, maybe Josh, if you want to kick that side of things off.
Yeah, sure. It's actually now more than ever, it's a huge part of my day. It's really the majority of how I spend my time. Because I see my role now as giving my team the tools they need to do their job as best as they can. And one of those is certainly making sure we have a roster that they're excited about and that they love. And we're fortunate to have a lot of great label partners who we work with who are constantly feeding us stuff anyway, based on what they're signing and releasing. But we also work with a lot of independent artists and who maybe own their own masters and or their own publishing. And so we're looking at stuff really every week. We the best place we get that stuff is from referrals. It's people sort of within who know us already and can kind of vouch for artists if it's not an artist that we is maybe really just starting out or from a scene that we're not familiar with or that kind of thing. If they know someone who's in our network and can get that person to vouch for them, not just name check them in our submission form, that's always truly the best way that we're finding new folks. And we also are fortunate to be a larger marketing company. We also do radio, promo, digital marketing, and press. And those things, they have separate rosters because they're all campaign based, but through that, we often do find out about new records early on in a way that's also really helpful from folks using those other services of ours.
Awesome. How about you, Kayla? How the artists finding their way to you or you finding your way to them?
I mean, yeah, a lot of what Josh said is true. I mean, I would say that referrals are definitely, pretty important. I mean, I try to carve out time every day if I can. It's turned into like a couple times a week versus every day right now, of just sitting down and actually doing A&R listening. But yeah, for the most part, referrals, we have a handful of supervisors and managers and label people that we trust, and they know us well and we trust their ear, and they'll refer a lot of stuff to us, and that's actually been really awesome. Also, I'm fortunate enough to have, friends outside of licensing and, this world back from when I was in the label world. So I have a lot of, friends that are booking agents and publicists and stuff like that. So they'll send me stuff, which has been really cool to work on. As Josh said, to like get in early is always the best. It's my favorite thing ever when someone's excited about an artist and they send it to me and they don't have a manager or a label or anything. And the idea and the goal is that we could get them, something that would kind of drive that.
Right.
Otherwise, I mean, in terms of A&R, like I'm on Bandcamp all the time. I've signed artists that have come onto my like Discover Weekly before. That's a real thing. That happens. So
Nice. And is there something in particular that you're looking for when you're signing artists? Like, is there any particular sound you guys specifically work with, or you're looking for stats, or is it just it's a great song? What are some of the kind of elements?
Well, the cool thing about our side of the business, I think, and Josh, like I'm sure you could speak to this too, is that the numbers and the followers and all that crap like doesn't matter. We're like a song-based side of the industry. So either the song works or it doesn't. And that's great because it evens the playing field for all, every artist. And it's really exciting when like a small unknown artist can compete with a bigger artist for, a big spot. But I think that in terms of what we're looking for, it's something that doesn't directly compete with anything on our roster. For our company, we like to we focus more on quality versus quantity. So we don't want to sign like a bunch of stuff that would directly compete sonically with each other, because then, we can't serve our artists. We can't super serve them. But in terms of what we're looking for, it's different. It varies. We don't want to be just a one genre type of company. We want to sign everything. So I don't know if that's a complicated answer or not. But yeah, what about you?
I think that's right on. I think music supervisors look to companies like Greater Goods and Terrorbird to sometimes point the way towards like what is next or stuff they haven't heard of. So to me, the big thing I wanted to add there is just like, we look for real artists, right? Like there are music libraries and music houses, production libraries that work with composers to create custom cues and work with a lot of instrumental stuff for, to create soundscapes for shows and all that. But we traffic in artists, and artist marketing is really like our goal. And that is something that we will often see in searches from music supervisors, is like, they will say like real bands only. And that means because they feel burned when they feel like they've been duped into thinking something was legit when it's not. But what Kayla mentioned is really key, which is like the numbers don't matter. They just want to know that it's real. And there's even, I've heard things from music supervisors that they are, also, especially during the time that we're in right now, specifically trying to focus on independent artists, knowing that like a little bit can go a very long way for those folks, where it doesn't mean as much to a Billie Eilish at this very moment to have her own song licensed for the thing. But I think that about covers it. We're okay with certain genres with kind of being more like all you can eat. I think if there's certain things that I feel like we can't have enough of, because there's enough, like, this sounds gnarly, but like, for lack of a better term, it's kind of like churn with it, or just like you kind of need a lot of options to throw at it, because you can't quite say like, what type of garage rock are they looking for this cell phone ad, right? Is it something like a little bit darker for this promo versus more upbeat for this? And like some artists really only have one tone that they do. So signing something that may be seen on its face as competitive actually isn't when we're making those A&R decisions, because we can compartmentalize it, and we can kind of say like, oh, okay, we know what they're trying to do and what they're going for, and we know where we would pitch this, as opposed to this thing, and maybe an artist that they might tour with, but who doesn't, who like does technically make some varied music where it's not going to be totally cannibalistic, but they'll be able to see some different opportunities.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's great. So besides the referrals from your network and friends, let's say an artist wants to reach out to you guys. Maybe you could talk a little bit about historically how people approach you and ways that you would prefer to be approached, and maybe some mistakes you've seen. Talk about that a little bit.
I'm happy to jump on that one. On that grenade, I will say that the biggest no is don't BCC us all on an email. We can tell when it isn't personal, and you can tell when you haven't looked at our website, right? Or when you if there's no connection at all, and you're just saying, because our website also says, like, if you don't know us, we prefer that you go through our submissions form, because we do actually listen to that, even if it's like an intern who's getting their first ears on it, just to say, like, again, is this like remotely in the realm of something that we might use? That's their only like kind of judgment on the music. Beyond that, it goes to our team, who's going to make a decision just as they would on any other artist. Like, is this useful to us or not? But when we see that, like, oh, this is just a blind email out to a bunch of, I'm sure we are number whatever of however many other licensing companies that you sent this to, with the same pitch, that makes me just archive that email immediately. Like, I don't listen to it. So that's my number one way of not doing it. The way to do it is to be more like personal. Like, why us? What made you look at the Terrorbird website and be like, oh, that's cool. Maybe you heard one of our songs in a show that you like, or there's a certain band on our roster that you care about or have played with or whatever else. And like, that matters to me more. And like recognizing, I think that like the human element is very important, because like ultimately our biggest like criteria for will we or won't we work with something is also like twofold. We have a big no assholes policy. So like anybody who's too pushy or is a jerk, we're not going to waste our time, because it's our life energy too. And the other one is that we want to make sure that people are working really, as hard as we are. And we want to see that like, that you're taking the time to know who you're reaching out to in the first place. So like, those are really our biggest things. Beyond that, we're down for whatever our creative needs are, as vast as the musical spectrum. So like, as Kayla said, we're not looking for like a single genre. And don't attach stuff to emails.
Yeah, that's going to be one of my questions. Yeah.
How about you, Kayla? Yeah.
Well, everything Josh said is exactly spot on. I think, my biggest pet peeve also would be just totally impersonal emails, where my name isn't even being addressed. I think it's safe to say that if you do enough digging in 2020, you can find someone's email. And if your stuff matters to you that much, like, you will make that little bit effort. Or you can at least find, who you're addressing the email to, in most cases. But yeah, I would say that, being personal goes a long way. Doing research on our company. Why would you be a good fit on the roster? Why, what previous placements have you seen that, we've done that were impressive to you? I mean, when I see that in an email, it makes me finish the email and not archive it, as Josh was saying. Another big no-no is sliding into the DMs. Don't do that. that happens. Yeah, that's a big no-no. I please don't slide in the DMs on LinkedIn either. I don't know. It's just, if you're pitching your music, find our email or do, the basic submissions email. And yeah, I'm trying to think what else. There are definitely a lot of no's, but I think.
What about when it comes to like the music that they're sending you and the way that they deliver that? I know you said no attachments, but like give us more about what needs to be presented to you and shared.
Right. I mean, obviously, if you have a DISCO account, it puts you at a huge advantage. That's, we'll be talking to some artists, and if they send over their DISCO link, it like makes our lives so much easier. Just if we do want to sign you, it's very easy to put that into our system. But I think that just sending very concise, clean links, and maybe even making a playlist of stuff that you think, would work for sync. That, I mean, I've seen artists that do that as well. Even if it's wrong, I think that it's definitely helpful. But yeah, no attachments. SoundCloud links are fine. Link to Spotify if you exist on there. Yeah. What about you, Josh?
The same thing. I mean, the nice thing to like, I think we've both been with using DISCO since they're in beta. So like for us, it has been such a game changer internally. And so when I see even, like an artist, manager, producer, whatever, who uses it, it does immediately make me go like, oh, that's like great. They've figured out sort of where like the industry standards are and are using this thing that is now like connected, is going to make it easy to connect with our system and our community. It's also streaming, so it's going to immediately, right, like you're immediately taking the attachments portion of things off the table. But in addition to that, like whether it's there or in the email, what you control is super important. Keeping sync in mind when you're pitching to us, like the number of times people will still send me something that they basically have no rights left to grant, meaning they have assigned their master rights to a label who we cannot work with, and they have a publisher who is not us, means we cannot work together. Or if your music contains uncleared samples, that is an issue. If you're using, even if you're using like beat libraries and that kind of thing, those are, making sure that you kind of have your side of the business buttoned up, because those are going to be our first questions. Even if we hear somewhere like, great, we like it. If we then have to go back, and if we're then sort of wasting that back and forth of like, oh, bummer that like you actually don't control any of this stuff, or you don't, that like it will be impossible for us to clear if someone is interested in it. That is, it's just a non-starter. So like getting that stuff in front of us right away is already super helpful. And yeah, social, Spotify, any of that stuff, it is helpful to give context around your band, because what Kayla said, like the specific numbers might not matter. Seeing that you're active does. And because every artist is active in different ways, right? Like you could be active from your bedroom, especially now, but you can also be like, you may have, you may be a big touring artist who doesn't do a lot of streaming numbers. You may be like, there's always those kind of, different ways to sort of spin your own story, and we do want to hear that. Anything to help us contextualize it, or again kind of put it in our universe, is only going to be helpful. Oh, one other thing, you can send us a whole record, that's fine, but keep in mind that if we don't know you, we might not hit play on the first track, right? So like if the first thing is like an ambient instrumental intro for the vinyl, right, like that's not as helpful as being like, well, track 6 is actually the single, right? Treat us, like you can give as many as you want, maybe pick out some highlight tracks or make a sync specific playlist, especially if you have a big catalog. It's really helpful to give us like really no more than a record's worth of music to, I think, give a taste for. You can still, again, contextualize it, say I have X number of masters. At least I think as far as we're concerned, we're not looking for people to be like the all singing, all dancing, whatever artist who can do it all. We want someone who like is a specialist more than anything. Like I'm not really interested in like your library as much as I am in what you do as a recording artist. That I think that's a difference between us and maybe some other
What they
companies.
do the best, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to skip forward a little bit and then come back sort of as far as the timeline of signing an artist. But because we're talking a bit about some of this rights control stuff, what do you need from an artist? Obviously, after you've signed the agreement already, but as far as the assets and other information from them, before you will start pitching them, what do you need to have? And you often have issues where an artist's like, oh, you haven't started pitching me yet. Like I sent you the files last week or month. And you're like, yeah, but we're missing X, Y, and Z. What are the critical bits of information and things that you guys need before you'll get going?
I mean, to speak to Josh's point, like to get the writer publishing information is so crucial. Because if there's any uncleared samples, I mean, I know that this is repetitive, but those are the two main things. I mean, if we cannot start pitching something until we specifically know that we can work with it and that we are able to clear it, because a lot of the times, we get briefs where there's a budget attached, there's so many terms attached, and we have to know how those specific songs match up against those terms. But I also think we have a pretty standardized way of doing things. When we sign someone, we need mastered waves. Waves are super important in our world. I would urge every artist to make sure to get mastered waves along with MP3s, but for the most part, waves are what supervisors ask for. Also, if you can and you have the budget, getting mastered instrumentals of all your music is super important, because we get asked for those a lot of the time. And there have been a handful of times where we've had a song get approved for something and, we don't have the instrumental, or it was never mastered, and that artist will lose the spot. It doesn't happen every time, but it's definitely happened. Keeping stems on hand is important. We don't need them up front, but having them is good as well. And yeah, lyrics, all that stuff, all the stuff that we can put into the Disco backend for all music is super important for us to have, and definitely makes you more of a better looking candidate to get a deal.
All right.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is if you have something that's forthcoming, that's also helpful, because all the stuff that Kayla mentioned, like there's a reason why, right? There's always we're not just asking for it because we like or want to just bury you in tasks to do, but like we need instrumentals, because sometimes it gives us, if you have instrumentals for every song in your catalog, we have twice as many songs to pitch. If they're mastered, they're going to compete with every other mastered instrumental, or like a song that is inherently instrumental. And so it'll just, because it does that psychological thing to anyone listening, even a professional. Oh, this sounds louder. I like this better. Like they're going to make that judgment, especially if they're playing it for, say, someone in an ad agency or someone without a musical background who kind of can't see past that. It is an important piece of the puzzle. And lyrics too, we get lyric specific searches all the time, or we might get something that, even whether it's a theme or they need to know if a song is clean or not. So having lyrics helps us contextualize your music so much faster, especially when we're just getting used to it. And the other thing is recent music, because sometimes we'll sign an artist who hasn't put anything out in maybe a couple of years, but we're like, well, we like this, we think we'll be able to pitch it. We're not personally motivated by solely new music, but when we have new things to pitch, just like having instrumentals, just like having your lyrics, each of those pieces of the puzzle, when searches come in that are asking for your new and unreleased stuff, latest and greatest, whatever, right? Every streaming show they front load all the production, obviously. So like, because everything comes out on the same day, it doesn't have the benefit of a broadcast show where they are able to work on episodes 7 through 13 while 1 through 6 are on the air, right? It all has to be done. So that means they also, some shows, it's very important, they don't want things to say sound stale by the time it actually comes out. They don't want it to sound like the song of last year when they're trying to be a super current, right? If you're like Euphoria or a show like that, it's important to stay extra current. So having brand new and unreleased stuff is helpful for us. And so sometimes people get frustrated when, like, I gave you my 2017 EP, how come you haven't given me anything? It's like, well, we had 5 songs and it's 3 years old. So like, I don't know how much you want us, like to me, then that also comes down to us managing expectations, but like, it does mean there's just fewer arrows in our quiver and there's less we can do with it. Yeah.
Let's talk about expectations. How do you manage expectations with the artists that are signed? What should an artist expect that has just, signed on the dotted line and sent you all of everything you need to get going? Now is it like, all right, let's see that money roll?
Honestly, sometimes, I mean, I think the thing that I really love about working where I work, and Mike, the owner of the company specifically, is that he is extremely honest and upfront and transparent. And I am that way, but I also like to sugarcoat things. So it's like nice to have that balance. But back in the day, I had a stint doing music PR, and my boss at the time would tell me, to tell clients that if she had a magic wand and could, make a Pitchfork premiere happen or whatever, like she would do it, but she doesn't have that magic wand. I mean, I'm probably totally butchered that, but it was something
right.
like that. And I feel like there's a lot of parallels with our side. I think that straight up, if you are talking to a sync agent and before you've signed anything and they make you a promise that they're going to get you on this show or whatever, that's a red flag, because no one can promise anything at all in anything in music, but especially with the sync. So I think in terms of managing expectations, our deals are usually 18 months, and it's for a good reason. It can take up to a year to really kind of build awareness around an artist to a lot of these music supervisors. It can sometimes take up to a year for us to see syncs start to roll in for certain artists. But for other artists, like an artist that we recently just signed now has like a few syncs that came like within the first month. So it's just kind of like managing those expectations. Like I would recommend that every artist signing a deal should go in with no expectations, because, they'll be pleasantly surprised, and just trust that even if you're not hearing anything from us, we are pitching your music, and, we signed you for a reason, especially a company like mine and a company like Terrorbird. We don't just passively sign artists. So we are definitely, pushing you guys.
You don't win just by having artists sitting on a shelf in the office.
No,
Yeah.
we would never do that, because I mean, it's our reputation too. We want, we know that's a small industry. We don't want people talking shit.
Yeah. Josh, can you tell us
true.
about setting expectations on your side, and then maybe move into like what you touched on, Kayla, bad deals. What's a bad deal and some of those red flags?
Yeah, sure. I oftentimes think of it as like, if there was sort of like a gambling line on the number of syncs that any record would get, it would be 1/2, meaning you can either expect to get over or under 1/2 of one sync. That means either 0 or 1 or more, right? Some people are super fortunate and they come out of the gate and they are, they're just flying. Everything lines up. But, especially for independent artists, right? You are either operating as a creative, you're operating ahead of the curve or on your own path entirely. So to Kayla's point about like how long it may take for those syncs to start rolling in, A, you're building a profile, and B, you're also waiting for sort of the homogenized pop culture of film and TV to come to you and your world, right? Like I think of artists like an artist like ours, Zola Jesus, who I think sort of is a prototype for a lot of what's been happening in pop music for the last couple of years. But when she started doing it, it was a very edgy thing. And now it's a very mainstream thing. And she's been fortunate to get syncs all along. But as like there's sort of like K-Flay, Grimes, Billie Eilish rises, like sort of like a darker tinged kind of epic pop thing is happening. She benefits from that, but it also she then has to compete with those major artists. So there's even like a blessing and curse to some of that stuff too. So like setting expectations is a challenging thing, but to me, again, it is more about like, if you're doing the work, we are too, because if, as Kayla said, there's no point in collecting you, right? That if you can always kind of see the door. If it's not working out, you can leave. We hope that you will stay, because we also, something I wanted to say before about why we pick things that we sign, which is relevant to this. We sometimes look at something like, how upset would I be if someone else signed this, right? Like, and that to me, part of that was looking at it in the long term, because some artists you're like, you might never get a sync, but when you do, when the opportunity comes up, we want you to be here because we know we'll remember it and we care about this record and we want to be able to pitch it. And that to me is hugely important, like a hugely important distinction. But other than that, I want to see that artists are continuing to work and produce and whatever that means for them. And we will be there to back that up. Sorry, and I'm supposed to seamlessly transition into the next part, which was
some of the bad deal.
What is
a bad deal?
Sure.
What to look out for? If you're an artist, you've never done a sync deal before, you don't even know what sync is. Someone's like, yo, come over into the back of this truck.
I got you.
Yeah.
That's a big no-no. Stranger danger is, well, no, I won't say stranger danger. There's plenty of artists who we have signed sight unseen. A bunch of our artists we've never met in person to this day. We've never, but we still work well together. You should be able to communicate with them. You should be able to get your questions answered. They should be able to answer specific questions you have about the state of their business, about your own music, about its place in it. As far as the actual deal structure, I think, for a sync licensing arrangement, anything longer than a couple of years seems like an overreach to me. And by the same token, I can't imagine doing this number even, but like certainly the upper end of what a commission should be from a third party would certainly be 50%. That is, and that is insane to me. I don't think that is worth your while unless a person is like, because actually, even if someone made you this pitch, you are my only client, right? You wouldn't want that, because that means that they're also not getting they're not getting every brief. They're not going to get every look. They're like, we're both fortunate to have diverse enough rosters, even though we may have specialty areas or things that we personally like to listen to more, that we have to have a diverse roster because storytelling is diverse. You have to have, and music searches are diverse. And so like you need to make sure that the company you're going with can provide that for you. So even if you're the only type of that artist on a given roster, that's something you want to ask them about. And hopefully the answer they would give you would be the same thing that I would tell you, which is obviously a great answer, which is that you would want to, I might say like, okay, this is an artist we don't have, any like Southeast Asian hip hop artists. If someone said, I have the Southeast Asian hip hop catalog, I'd be like, great. We actually get searches sometimes for that. Don't get them every day. But you know what? You would be the only Southeast Asian hip hop artist or catalog on our roster. So if anything comes in for that, we're going to get it. And I don't think there's any searches that are going out that we're not seeing. I'm quite confident about that. Like we've all been doing this long enough that like we have the contacts to get the stuff. So yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So to me, exclusivity, like, ooh, sorry, do you mind if I...
Exclusivity, talk about
non-exclusivity. Is that okay? I hate non-exclusive deals. We only do exclusive deals. And here's why. You can ask music supervisors too, and they will tell you the same thing. Non-exclusive deals, just all they do is muddy the waters, right? It creates animosity between teams. You're going to have, everybody has to fight when all of a sudden something comes through to prove that they did their work, rather than if you were on staff and a salary at a label or a publisher, an A&R person's not going to storm into the sync licensing office's door and be like, F you, I got this sync, you're not getting paid this month. No, everybody pulls their weight and does their thing. If you're doing what you say you do and you're servicing the music and you're building relationships with music supervisors, you're doing your job, right? There's a bunch of stuff we might negotiate that's gratis. We're not commissioning that. And so then all of a sudden to be like, oh, when money is a thing, non-exclusive deals are the first thing to take a hit. And music supervisors will tell you that if, say, Greater Good serviced something and Terrorbird serviced something, and it wasn't clear that the master was with Greater Goods, but the sync side was with Terrorbird, right? Those are exclusive deals. That's still fine. You can have two people pitching it, but what they control must be exclusive. If they see that both of us pitched it as a one-stop, they're just going to go with option B, right? We're not working with artists that are big enough to make the fight worth it for them. And they also don't want to poison the well with us. They don't want to not commission Kayla because that damages their relationship going forward if they then give it to Terrorbird, right? So like they have to make a decision in that moment. And so most of them will just choose to like, there were three things I liked, I'll just throw this one out. These are my number one and number two now. So like to me, it is only negative. I don't see the positive.
Yeah, I 100% agree. We also do not sign unexclusive deals for the same exact reason that Josh just outlined. Also, I've talked to music supervisors who have said that it kind of like devalues the music sometimes. You know, it's very bizarre if there's a few different companies pitching the same song for different prices almost. And that can happen
Right.
and be really, really difficult. So yeah, that's the whole thing on exclusivity. I mean, in terms of a bad deal, I would just say, you know, ask for a contract, make sure the contract is clear, make sure those guidelines are not vague. I've heard of a lot of people making deals without signing anything, and they'll be like, oh yeah, well, they're pitching my music, but I didn't technically sign anything, and that can get a little weird. So I would just say, you know, make sure that you do that. Definitely don't sign with the company that requires a fee for you to be considered, which is a thing I've heard of happening, which is interesting. It's like pay to play, modernized.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of what else. You kind of covered a lot of what I was going to say about exclusivity.
And so some of the rates, like the commission rate, like 70-30 in the artist's favor, 60-40 in the artist's favor, 50-50 being like worst case scenario as far as you're concerned, Josh. You know, do you guys feel it's generally within third party sync, it's floating between like 25 and 40% for the most part? And like, is that about what you see and agree with?
Yeah, I do. I think, I mean, I think I saw someone just flip this in the comments about someone saying they've never seen anything over 20%, but that's mostly with major artists. I think that's right. They have leverage just like anyone else does. With independent artists, we are, even ones with a profile, right? We're laying groundwork for them in a way and adding infrastructure to their team in a way that that they just otherwise don't have access to. So like, sure, you know, again, if you're Travis Scott, you could get someone to like pitch your music for probably 5% commission, right? If you are, even with 30 writers on a track, they'll do that because they know it'll pay off. But with us, we're marketing your record. We're part of that team. And even though it's not it should never be feed based in the way that a radio campaign was, because as we've talked about, like you can't guarantee a sync in the same way and in the same time frame, despite what labels would love to have happen. You would be, it's really, yeah, the commission rates should be somewhere in a place that everyone's comfortable with and motivated by, like, and put in practical terms, right? Like if you get a $2,000 all-in sync, are you okay with, you know, only getting 70% of that fee? In the same way, if you got $100,000 sync, are you okay with the opportunity in exchange for whether it's, you know, 85% of that fee or 70% or 60% of that fee? You know, make sure it's something you're comfortable with. But I would say most of them are probably in like the, yeah, kind of 15 to 35, 40 range. That sounds right.
Yeah.
Cool. So I want to jump in with one question that someone had chimed in about, and then I want to segue into one last thing before we wrap up, kind of about current climate situation. But the question before that is, do you guys share briefs with your artists?
Oh, this is an interesting question.
Right.
So before COVID, we we're not. I mean, we would if we had a specific writing opportunity, something that like, you know, made sense for an artist to potentially custom write for. But for the most part, we keep those internal. And, you know, I've heard of other companies uploading their stuff. I'm like nervous because I'm like, I don't know if Josh shares his or not. So I'm like, I don't know what I should say. But on our side, you know, we keep everything internal. That being said, we recently started sharing certain briefs with artists after COVID-19 started for a handful of reasons. But it was more just to kind of share the landscape we're at right now, because it's very, very different than where we were at before this. But then again, there are trend-based things that have changed in the past couple weeks. I don't know if any of you have cable TV, but if you have seen commercials for anything in the past couple weeks, or I don't know about currently, but probably about like 2 or 3 weeks ago, it was all sad piano, hopeful building stuff. And, you know, we had a lot of productions that are, you know, put on hold now. So a lot of the briefs that we were getting were just for ads and not for film and TV as much. And most of them were calling for that type of music. So in that case, we were sharing those briefs with some of our artists. We were having some people write specific things, but at the end of the day, that's not really us as a company. If you're familiar with, you know, Greater Goods and our roster, like we are not the go-to for sad, hopeful piano. So yeah, we try not to do that. But, you know, if there are certain artists that ask to see certain briefs, we'll definitely share. But for the most part, we're not blasting briefs out. I think that's a really, really quick way to lose trust within a lot of music supervisors that we're also just friends with and who trust us. And I think that's generally just a big no-no to just blast your brief out to everybody.
Someone just asked, what are briefs? Well,
okay.
There's of course underwear. There's also searches. We call them searches or briefs, depending. Yeah. It's what we get from a music supervisor, agency, et cetera, describing what their needs are for a project. So that's what we are pitching to. Yeah, just on, a very basic level thing. Every day we're broadly pitching music at times. When we get, say, a new record in, we're like, oh, so-and-so would really love this, or that'd be great for this project. We'll send it to them. Otherwise, the big thing is responding to briefs. It's weirdly reactionary. They send us what their needs are, and we look through our catalog to best service those needs. We don't share those with artists, but I agree, there are always exceptions. I will say this, we would never share a music supervisor's contact information. No. I would be copying and pasting that stuff because it goes through us. That's the whole reason you have a rep, and that's not me being a dick about it. That is just that is a professional courtesy to them and to the rest of our roster. But we're also a publisher, so we do share briefs, especially where they have room for, say, original music or a time frame that would allow for someone to write something custom or maybe do a cover or something like that. In those cases, we're sharing those briefs. Otherwise, unless it's just more of to that expectation management thing, where if they're just like, well, then what are they even asking you for? Give me an example. Like, sure, yeah. I'll send some stuff, just so you can see what information we're working with and maybe why we wouldn't have sent your music for something, but otherwise they're staying internal.
Awesome.
Yeah. So can you guys talk a little bit quickly just about what is sync like these days? What is the landscape? What are you seeing come in?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Kayla nailed it with the sad piano, sad to hopeful, right? Forget about Toyota. So we'll be here. So and come to the drive-through. And so otherwise one big thing is seeing who the new rat kings of the outbreak are. Where Clorox has piles, like Scrooge McDuck pools of money now. We're like, I don't remember the last Bleach ad we were pitching music for, let alone the budgets for some of these things. And there are other, that's something we're seeing. It's just a huge disparity. Some people, because they really are in some cases in dire straits, at least to the point where you understand advertising spending has gone down, because it's typically based on a percentage of the production budget. And so when your production is putting together Facebook posts, you may only have like $7,000 for an ad. And then it's up to us and our clients whether or not we think that's worth it to license a song for. But other things are, they're still, some of them are bigger than we've ever seen for certain brands and categories, and other ones are right where they've always been. Way more advertising. There's obviously like a slowdown in production. We measured it out, and it's about a 20% drop from where we were last year, which is better than I thought. Just,
yeah, actually that is.
Yeah. But like Kayla mentioned too, like there was a shift, right? We passed the like sad bastard part of it, we hope. And now everyone's like, now come and party with us. We're ready for you. Like I think that's the new thing. We're like, let's not try to and I think it's also gotten the piss taken out of it on social media as well. Like a lot of people ragging on the sameness of all these ads because everyone has time to pay attention to it. And streaming shows have a lot more content in the can. So as far as like where we're seeing like scripted stuff come from, it's much more the streaming platforms and broadcast networks who I think are still navigating like, well, what are we going to do now that there's no Olympics, right? Like,
do you feel that the actual repercussions of this financially for people pitching in sync music supervisors studios is 6 months away because of the flow of money, just as far as like, we're getting paid at the moment for stuff that happened a while ago. So since there was nothing happening, is that something you guys are sort of very aware of or hoping not to think about too much?
We have no idea. We're learning, we're taking it day by day, just praying that business is going to keep coming. But yeah, as Josh said, like, it hasn't been that bad on the film and TV side. Like, I didn't do the numbers. 20% is a fascinating number, but yeah, we still get those searches sometimes. But yeah, to answer the first question, the sync landscape is exactly how Josh described it in terms of ads. But I think that also because all of us are, I don't really know how productions are going to work now. I'm praying that enough things are in post-production that they can still keep rolling out. But before all this happened, with the transition to streaming and all these like long form shows, I think that, we're going to start, we've already started seeing it. I think all genres of music are pretty much becoming like popular now, which is great. There was a time where it was like just, Black Keys, like garage rock stuff used in this. And, now you have shows like, Rami, for example, or Rami, I never know how to say it, like on Hulu that are using different music. High Maintenance, one of my favorite shows, like uses like such diverse music. And I think that it's actually a really, really cool time to be an artist, especially an independent artist, making something different and weird and taking a chance or whatever, because I think a lot of these shows are creating space for those songs to be included. So that's the positive side of
we like that.
I love that. Thanks for saying that.
Yeah, I've been watching a lot of TV, and obviously I'm like hyper aware of music every time I do, but there have just been so many shows where I'm like, oh my God, like I love this song. This song came out in like 74. Like what? Like, I don't know. It's just, cool shit like that's happening now. And I feel like that's why I, went into this business, because I loved, the creative side of pairing music to picture and not, pairing piano ballads to Clorox ads.
Yeah.
They are baked beans, the new kings.
This was not sponsored by Clorox.
Yeah. No, and also
we will not disrespect our overlords, please. Yeah. I think there's also a bit of like to speak to the when are we lagging indicators in this, right? Are we going to get hit 6 months from now? Maybe, but I do think, much like to paraphrase Jurassic Park, production finds a way. Like, I do think that there's just too much money invested in Hollywood. So at least as far as where, I can't speak for my wife who's a commercial producer whose job exists on set, but I can speak to, for like our purposes for licensing music, we'll probably see an animation boom, right? What's something that people can do if they're isolated. We'll probably see, I wouldn't be surprised if you're Amazon, Netflix, Hulu down the line, and certainly if you are any of the other dozens of platforms that are supposed to launch this year, you might be revisiting a bunch of independent films, right? You might be and seeing like, well, what could we maybe, because Netflix doesn't have less money now, right? They have plenty of money they could reinvest it into an independent film that maybe had crappy post-production done on it, right? They could go back in and tweak some of the visuals, add new music, like boost up the music budget where there wasn't one. And obviously that's I'm particularly inclined to do that. No one said that to me. It's just my idea. So Netflix, if you're out there, you're on the call. So you can have it. You can take credit for it in your staff meeting and everything. But I do think that there's plenty of hope to be had. And I do think, the diversity of storytelling is not going away, right? If anything, people and licensing real music is not going away, because you have more people paying closer attention to more content than you've ever had, this captive audience in a way that these platforms have always dreamed of. But the Twilight Zone twist is that you might not have a way to make new shows. So they're going to figure it out for goddamn sure. Yeah. So I'm not really sweating it. And in the meantime, we're all just kind of hoping that there's enough of like a staggering of stuff and not a stagnation to get us kind of over the line. Yeah. So
Definitely. Well, you guys, we went on way longer than I anticipated, but you guys had so much good stuff to say. So thank you. Sorry to everyone. Yeah, I know, right? Sorry to everyone who we didn't get to your questions. There were so many, and I felt like they were answering a lot of things that came in already. But this is being recorded. We're going to share it with everyone. Again, Kayla's at The Greater Goods. Josh is at Terrorbird. If you guys want to stick around, we said this was only going to be an hour, but we're going to continue on and show you guys how you can do a lot of the tips that Josh and Kayla said in Disco. So stick around if you have 20 minutes, please. And thanks again, guys.
Awesome. Thank you for having us. Thank you everyone for joining. Awesome. This is so cool.
Thanks. Yeah. It's been cool seeing where everyone's from.
Yeah. I know. A very diverse audience.
You're welcome, Joel.
Yeah. People love you guys.
And Stuart and Christina and Dan and Corin and Jeffrey and Robert and JJ. Okay. I'm just not in the chat. Thanks, everybody.
Cool. All right.
Okay, word.
Well, I'm going to switch over to sharing my screen. And I thought what might be the quickest, easiest thing to do is let's just do a quick EPK. Let's cut straight to the chase about how you can make a real nice looking presentation for sending out your music if you're going to send it to a sync company to possibly get signed, or if you're sending it direct to supervisors, managers, radio, whoever. So I'm going to reverse engineer an EPK, otherwise known as an electronic press kit. This is one for a band called Racing and an album called Real Dancing. So inside Disco, it looks like this. There's all the tracks in the album, instrumentals, photos, video. And if I open this up to show you the public view that would be seen by a person you share this with, here's what it looks like. And so I'm going to recreate this for you, but let's just start at the end. So it's got a theme on it, what we call a theme, which is a background image and a logo. So you can customize those for any playlist that you send. There's a playlist message here, which you could put the bio or press release, anything you want to say. Obviously, you can link out to socials and other things like that. Then we've got these sections to divide up the content. One section has the main album. As you know, you can, that was loud. As you know, you can play through the music, scroll through the waveform, read the lyrics. Every track is downloadable either as an MP3, a WAV, or an AIF in this case. On slightly higher disco plans, we'll convert WAVs to AIFs for you and AIFs to WAVs. And then always in disco, if you upload a WAV or an AIF, and as Kayla was saying, they always want WAVs. Well, when you do that, it always creates an MP3 anyway. So there's always going to be your high-res WAV file and your MP3 at the very least, and they just travel around the universe together. The MP3 is there so you can stream quickly and contain metadata. Here I've got all the instrumentals, mastered instrumentals, as they said, are especially helpful. Oftentimes the lyrics aren't right for a specific scene, but the actual music behind it is perfect. So you definitely don't want to forget about that part. Add some photos in. So you can always add your press shots. You could drop in the artwork file as well. You just upload them just as if they were songs, and then you can play back videos. So always get in your latest content. So that's a really quick look at a finished product. You'll also notice, obviously, on our playlists, you can always save to Disco, which is the same as on a section or on a track. And you can always download the entire thing. And if you weren't aware, there is this option as well, where you can actually choose, oh, I want that file and that file and this file and that file, and then download or save those to Disco. So hopping back in, let's recreate. Oh, I've got a message. This is our support, guys. You can always write to us and say howdy hi, and you can get rid of those. So let's just start. I was going to upload some things, but I'm not going to, just to save time. You can always drag tracks from your computer or hard drive or iTunes just onto this little square, and they upload to Disco. It would look like that. I'm going to take everything in this promo EPK as if I just uploaded it. So when you do this in Disco and you drag an existing playlist into a new playlist, it just copies the files over. You'll notice that both of those were playing at the same time. That is the same file. It's not made a copy of the file, but I can put the same track into a bazillion playlists if I want to. Okay, I've got my main album. I'm going to break this into sections. That's how I get my dividers on the playlist. So add a section. Let's just say, however you want to call a main part, and let's do instrumentals. These section lines you just drag around. Let's find our instrumentals. There we go. So everything below that line is now a section called Real Dancing Instrumentals. This is a section with the main tracks, and I'm just going to do one more for the media files. All right, and we'll call it ready to save. This is the part where I'm going to change the settings for the playlist. So first is a theme. I've already got a theme here, which you saw before, but if you were going to create a new one, create new theme, drag on the background image, drag on the logo image, and it's got recommendations for the actual pixel size. If you're always going to use the same theme, set it as a default. For now, let's just choose that. Message right here. Let's just copy and paste this. So this is where you'd paste in your bio. To create links, it's better to write this in a doc, a Google Doc or Word or something, or an email even, and then you can create the hyperlinks in the email or wherever you wrote this. And when you copy and paste it into Disco, it retains those hyperlinks. Down here, we've got the show lyrics option, so that the lyrics that are in the metadata are going to appear. I will come back and show you how to edit metadata. And those are the main settings that I want to do. So let's save this and just take a quick look. That's a link I could share immediately. So let's open up the public view. And there you go. Our theme, our bio, and our sections. So if you create something like this and start sharing it with sync companies or whoever you're trying to, build relationships with, hopefully it's going to put you in a slightly more advantageous position than somebody that's just sharing a SoundCloud link or a Dropbox link or a WeTransfer, or worse, attaching files to an email. Just to round back, I'm in the browse area, which is essentially home in Disco, and there's the playlist that I just saved. It just goes to the top of the list. Let's just take one step back and look at the metadata. We'll just pretend I uploaded waves, and there's no metadata on any of these files because wave files do not carry ID3 metadata, to be really specific about the kind of metadata. And that is what most people are going to read. Like if you're in iTunes, it's got to be ID3 type metadata. There are other variations, but I'm not going to get confusing here. So I'm editing 32 tracks right now. Let's just go backwards and show you that again. The playlist menu, edit all, is referring to the metadata on all the tracks in that playlist. And I've got all this different mixed information. I probably wouldn't do this with the video and the artwork, but for the audio tracks, I'd separate them out and then edit. So I could drag on the artwork here if I had not already put it on. The artist name is the same for all of these files. The album is the same for all of these files. You can't edit the title in bulk here, just as well. In the comments, your contact information at the very, very least should be in the comments. And then as Kayla and Josh were talking about, they need to know, what do you control? What are your rights in this music? So do you own all of the publishing and the master recordings here? Or if you have a label deal and they control the masters, then you can say, I have 100% of the publishing, but Sony Music has the masters. So only the publishing is available for this third-party sync company to actually pitch on your behalf. And when they send these songs out, the information, the fact that Sony owns the master will be in the metadata, because that makes the life of a music supervisor easier. They're like, okay, great, I know all the people at Sony to clear this music if I need to. Genre. The best advice is 3 genres max in the genre field. That's what most supervisors like to see. Grouping is a place that you can, again, put contact information and mention your rights that you control. Some people put all of the rights control information in the grouping, and often we'll just see it doubled. It's in the grouping and the comments field. One thing to notice is the comments field's a lot bigger. So on a first view in Disco, I can see a lot more of the comments, whereas grouping is, I can only see this much, even though it can continue off the screen here. BPM's helpful, but not necessary. Year is helpful, but not super necessary. ISRC is above and beyond, but if you've got it, put it in. Composer splits, really, really helpful. Now, especially if we're going to the sync company for the first time, I've got 50%. I wrote 50% of the song, and my co-writer wrote 50% of the song. That is enormously helpful information. So put it in there, as well as if you're affiliated with a with a performing rights organization like ASCAP or BMI or PRS, APRA. Every country's got their own PROs. Put that in next to the composer. So Tim, ASCAP, 50%. You're giving a lot of really useful information. These comments are only internal, so whatever you put here is for your own eyes. Same with the writers tab. You can actually put in the writer splits here, but it only stays inside your DISCO account. It is worth noting though that if you fill this out, there's a business setting that will write all of this information automatically into the composer field. Let's just take a real quick look at that. In settings, business, include the writer split info from the writers tab in the composer field on downloaded tracks. So if you do check this and you've got all your writers tab filled out on every song, you won't see the information in DISCO in the composer field. But if you download the files, it writes it into the composer field. So that's a really nice way of laying out the information. And then lastly, when you're bulk editing songs, you can't edit metadata for the lyrics or the title. So let's just look at a single track. So after you bulk edit everything and get it in, here's an example of how it could all look. Here's the lyrics. Copy and paste them. Some people are like, oh, I've got the lyrics in a PDF file or a doc. That's cool. You can upload that PDF just as if it was a track, and it can live in your account and you can share it. Sometimes just having all of your lyrics for all of your songs in a single PDF is fine, but it's better to actually get the text pasted into this field, because this travels with the song when it's sent to another DISCO or downloaded, and it's all searchable. So if I just happen to be looking for something with the word Garrison in it, it comes up in my search results. So imagine that this file was sent to a supervisor, and 6, 7, 8 months later, they're doing a search. They're like, oh yeah, Garrison is the key word here. Oh, great. The song just came up because that information was in the lyrics. So how much time does it take you to write your lyrics out and get them in the metadata? And once you've done it one time, it's done forever. And your music could be found 15 years from now, frankly, because of the fact that you did that. So take your metadata very seriously, and take the time to fill it out, especially if you've got a sync team that's going to go to bat for you. For them to have to fill all this information out for you, that's a lot of work. And you could do it in less than an hour easily. But if they've got 50 other artists they're working on and they're trying to get them all ready to send out for sync, if you deliver the music perfect to them, all the metadata, WAVs, AIFs, MP3s, artwork, bio, what's going on in your world, you're miles ahead of so many other artists. And if you're a manager of artists, then this is absolutely the way to get ahead. A lot of managers that I talk to are like, what's metadata? Or, I don't understand anything about licensing. Or they're all just learning, and that's great. And so everyone that's here is obviously here to learn. And so hopefully this is helpful and shows you a way that you can really set yourself apart for whoever you're pitching this music to. The iPhone app is out in beta now for DISCO. If you want it, we can send you a link to download it and add it to your phone. It's not in the Apple Store yet. Hopefully that'll be soon, but you can still get it and use it. This is amazing for running around and listening to music, off your phone, especially unreleased stuff that's not in Spotify. I think that's pretty much enough information for one day. I guess the last thing I'd say is, in the share area, there's security. You can add passwords to your playlists. Frankly, only do that if you're extremely important and want to make people's lives a little more difficult to try and listen. Link expiry is possible. I definitely don't recommend having expiring links, but it's possible. And you can embed playlists onto your website if you happen to have one. There's an embed code. A lot of people use this instead of a SoundCloud embedded player. It's just taking a second to appear. And you can make it downloadable or not downloadable. There's a few settings here. And you can always change the color scheme of the buttons and these colors right here. This code is the color code, and the size of the player. You need to play with this sometimes to make it fit on your site the right way. That being said, I'm gonna stop
Real
sharing.
quick, for everyone interested in the iOS app, I just put information in the chat on how you can download that to your iPhone. So use it, give us your feedback. You'll have to download a test flight app. It's not quite in the App Store yet, but it works just as well. It's fantastic.
Are there any questions, Katrina, that you feel like I should address right now?
There is a question about tracking. If we could just talk about that real quick, I think that's helpful to see.
Cool, yeah.
Stats,
So
and then we can wrap up.
Perfect.
Cool.
Okay, if you've shared a playlist, you can go to its little menu and open up playlist stats. And you can see if you've assigned the playlist to each person individually, which you do in the share area, then you'll see each individual person's activity, and you can hover over these numbers, 2 track downloads. Those are the tracks, 6 streams, 12 streams. So that's the idea. If you did not assign the URL to a particular person, then you'll see other recipients and all of their combined activity. Really quickly, if you do want to find out how to assign, share, assign a URL, put in their name or email and hit assign, and you'll see there's a new URL for each person, which you would then copy and share with that particular person. Don't open these URLs in your browser, because it will tell that your computer that you are this person, and Disco will start generating stats potentially that Bill opened this playlist, but actually it was you. So just, if you want to look at your playlist in the public view, then go to the copy URL, and it's the public playlist URL that you want to open, and by default, that's the one you would always share. Lastly, on stats, if you go into contacts and you open a contact by clicking on them, you'll see at the bottom in the activity area, all playlists you've assigned to that contact and their activity or lack of activity. So that's a quick look at stats. Feel good, Katrina?
I think so. That was a lot of information, a lot of really, really good stuff from Kayla and Josh.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you guys again for joining. If anyone is attending that has not checked out Disco yet, we have a free trial. So give it a spin. You can just go to DISCO.ac, free 30 days. Hit us up with any questions if you want trainings. We are always happy to oblige. And thanks again. This was great.
Cool. Thanks, Holden, for helping in the background.
Yeah, thank you.
And of course, thanks to Kayla and Josh for all of their very, very helpful insights.
Yeah, this is great. And again, we'll send a recording and you can share with your friends.
Great. All right. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Cheers.